Donald Trump attacks a group of Democratic Congresswomen of color, Democrats calling his remarks racist. We'll look at the US leader's history of racist comments with France 24's Douglas Herbert. Jacob Zuma's day in court. South Africa's former president is giving evidence at a corruption inquiry. He says he's the victim of a political witch hunt. And Algeria supporters take to the streets of Paris and other French cities after their team reached the final of the Africa Cup of Nations by beating Nigeria 2-1. Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Claire Pride. It's good to have you with us. We start with Donald Trump accused again of being racist after suggesting that several Democratic Congresswomen, quote, go back from where they came. All four women targeted, but not named by him, are women of color. They include Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the youngest woman elected to Congress. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called Trump's comments xenophobic, and here to tell us more, international affairs commentator Doug Herbert. So, Doug, this tweet causing widespread outrage, and this, in your view, fits a well-established pattern with Donald Trump, both before and during his presidency.
Yeah, it's merely the lowest point in what has been a lifetime behavioral pattern of racist comments. I'm not saying racially charged, I'm saying racist comments. Look, people who knew Donald Trump before, even well before he became president, were close to him when he was in the real estate business, basically said that he was well known. He disparaged people of other races. He disparaged Jews. He said Jews were good with money. Black people are lazy. Puerto Ricans dress badly. These are obviously playing on racial stereotypes. He's basically built a career out of stoking racial resentments, kindling racial fires. It's racial demagoguery, as some people would call it. And in the case of his slogan itself, Make America Great Again, it's been commented not by several people that the slogan would probably better be put, Make America White Again, because he sees a changing America. Donald Trump is now 72 years old. He comes from an earlier generation, a generation of Americans that is now soon to be overtaken by a much more multicultural, much more multiracial America. And this is a generation that wants to hark back to a whiter America. It's as simple as that. But Donald Trump himself has very overtly played on these on this racial demagoguery, as I called it. He came into his campaign in his presidential bid with the birther conspiracy theory, as you remember, about President Obama being born in Africa rather than in Hawaii. Obviously, he would have been disqualified from running for president if he had been born outside the United States. He then stormed in the campaign calling Mexican rapists, calling for a ban on all Muslims entering the United States. Later, there was a judge, an American-born judge of Mexican heritage, that he basically said couldn't be fair because of his ethnic background. We have had time and again repeated racially, not just racially charged, but racist statements. You'll famously remember the rally in Charlottesville over a Confederate monument where there were neo-Nazis participating in one side of that rally, where Donald Trump made a comment afterwards saying there were very fine people on both sides. He was careful to also denounce neo-Nazis, but very fine people on both sides. This wasn't a case of equivalency here. There were some very not fine people on one side of that rally, and he's kept this pattern up.
And these latest comments targeting Congresswomen, how are they being reported on in the U.S.?
It's incredible with Donald Trump. There seems to be a different moral standard when judging. It's as if a lot of people, including people like us in the media, journalists, we've sort of put Trump in a different category. We say Trump will be Trump. And because of that, he's given, if not a free pass, at least this sense of we're not going to call him a racist. A lot of the reporting in the U.S., the big American networks, the three nightly television newscasts still watched by tens of millions of Americans, tended to lean on the term critics as a crutch. We do it on France 24, right here on this channel. We say critics say, Democrats are saying he's a racist. What you won't find in most reporting, and I say most because not all, there are some news outlets which you do not semantically skirt the issue, which will say he's a racist, but what most will say is they'll use a crutch or a shield. There's this sense of false equivalency that you can't call Donald Trump a racist, and yet if you look at the dictionary definition of racism, we could perhaps put it up on our screen right now, the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of racism. Perhaps we don't have it. It's right there. Basically, look at that last one, a political or social system founded on racism, racial prejudice, or discrimination discrimination. Donald Trump, if you read those descriptions, to a T in his comments and his politics fits those descriptions there. So yes, U.S. media has been very careful. They don't want to be seen as being unobjective, but in the name of trying to seem objective, this he said, she said type of journalism, you actually end up doing a disservice to a lot of news consumers and people who read and watch your news, because at the end of the day, he is a racist. Factually, you can say he's a racist based on the dictionary definition of racism.
Now, I mentioned Nancy Pelosi's reaction. We've also heard from many other Democrats. The Republicans, though, not so much.
No, and this also, you said we were talking about patterns. This also fits a pattern throughout this presidency. It's not that Republicans a lot of Republicans are probably privately in horror at these remarks, and they probably have strong feelings about them and would like to speak out against them, but they run from it. They run from it for the same reason we've been seeing them towing the Trump line on so many other issues and failing to just step up to the plate and denounce it, even if they disagree with him, because at the end of the day, they are extremely scared. Some of them are petrified, especially as the new election season swings into gear, of alienating his base, the base of Trump voters, of core voters that have stuck with him through thick and thin and are not going to decamp. So at the end of the day, there's this sense of solidarity with their president, the president who's championed by an America that these Republicans in this party do not want to alienate in any way, shape, or form. And I'll just leave you with one thought. We talked about the tweets. There's actually the tweets themselves. Donald Trump has lied, according to the Washington Post, over 6,000 times in his presidency. This is also a lie, the actual factual basis of the tweet, because the actual congresswomen, there were 4 of them that he was impugning, only one of them was actually born outside of the country. She was a Somali refugee, came with her family at the age of 12 from Somalia. The rest are all American-born. So this goes back to a famous racist trope in American history. If you're not purebred, white-bread American, you're not true American.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Doug, for your commentary. Now, fear and anxiety on Sunday amongst undocumented migrants in the U.S., 2 days after Donald Trump confirmed that potentially 2,000 of them would be targeted. But evidence of raids was scarce yesterday. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio accusing Trump of fear-mongering.
At this church in Chicago, activists and community leaders standing ready to assist immigrants targeted in raids. Agents from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, had been expected to conduct operations in at least 10 major cities nationwide, with plans to arrest thousands of undocumented migrants. By late Sunday, though, few raids had actually materialized. Critics have denounced what they call a political stunt designed to frighten immigrant communities and fire up Donald Trump's base as the president begins his re-election campaign.
He's stoking fear, and he's trying to pit immigrant against citizen in a way that's very, very cynical. But then when the moment of truth comes, suddenly it's all fear, no action.
Last month, Trump announced that ICE would soon begin targeting millions of illegal immigrants. Many Democratic U.S. mayors have since underlined their commitments to not cooperate with federal immigration authorities. ICE's acting director defended its operations as a limited and necessary response.
We are doing targeted enforcement actions against specific individuals who have had their day in immigration court and have been ordered removed by an immigration judge. We are merely executing those lawfully issued judge's orders.
Unprecedented numbers of asylum-seeking migrants have arrived at the U.S.'s southern border in recent months, most of them fleeing poverty and violence in Central America. Thousands are currently being held in badly overcrowded detention centers, a problem that advocates fear could be severely worsened if mass roundups do begin.
Turning our attention to South Africa, where former President Jacob Zuma is being questioned at a corruption inquiry. His grilling is being televised and is expected to go on until Friday. The allegations relate to his 9 years in power. Zuma insists he's innocent.
Me as an individual, I've been a subject of talk in this country for more than a decade. I've been vilified, alleged to be the king of corrupt people.
Now, GRN's Jane Flanagan is covering this story for us. I spoke to her a short while ago about the allegations against Zuma.
Previous witnesses at the Commission have given evidence that Jacob Zuma's 9 years in power saw wholesale corruption, a looting of the state coffers, a selling of influence, to the point where the Gupta brothers, a wealthy Indian-born family, were able to buy influence and even pick cabinet ministers in order that lucrative contracts be funneled towards their empire of businesses. And under Jacob Zuma's rule over South Africa, then pretty much everything was for sale. And the commissioners heard very eye-popping testimony, actually, about money being stuffed into bags, about how threats were made if people didn't go along with what was being asked of them. And this is Mr. Zuma's chance to put forward his version of what was behind these allegations.
And what he's been saying today is that these allegations against him are politically motivated.
Yes, and he was expected to say that. He really has shown no great enthusiasm for coming to the Commission. Judge Zondo has been asking his lawyers what their intentions were for several months. He asked to see questions in advance, which is not something that any other witness has been, any other privilege given to any other witness, but somehow he was expecting to be treated differently. He has not provided an affidavit to the court, which sets out his account of his relationship with the Gupta family, or why anyone is claiming the widespread looting that went on his behalf. So what he's going to say to the Commission, and he's scheduled to be there for 5 days, is anyone's guess. What is not expected to happen is that he'll really shed too much light on the goings-on of his time in office, but really portray himself as a victim of smearing, of political allegations, and this is probably going to be some days of embarrassment for the ruling African National Congress Party and President Ramaphosa as well.
Jane Flanagan reporting. Now, EU foreign ministers are talking about Iran in Brussels today, this amid high tensions between Iran and the US, and a week after the UN's nuclear watchdog confirmed that Iran had enriched uranium beyond the limits of the 2015 nuclear deal. Today, Iran's nuclear agency said Tehran was reducing its commitments under the agreement in order to make the other signatories to the deal fulfill their duties. One of those signatories is, of course, the UK.
Well, it isn't dead yet, and we are totally committed to keeping the Middle East denuclearized. If Iran acquires nuclear weapons, then other countries in the region will acquire nuclear weapons. It becomes a very, very toxic and dangerous situation. Iran is still a good year away from developing a nuclear weapon. We think there is still some closing but small window to keep the deal alive.
Now, Algeria supporters took to the Champs-Élysées on Sunday to celebrate their team getting through to the Africa Cup of Nations final. Algeria will face Senegal on Friday after beating Nigeria 2-1. Celebrations were tense, though, at times, not just here in Paris, but in several parts of the country, as Claire Muffson reports.
It's just after 11 p.m. Horns blaring and flags flying. Overjoyed Algeria fans rush onto the Champs-Élysées to celebrate a nail-biting semi-final victory over Nigeria.
Everyone is happy because of Algeria's victory. Everyone was a bit stressed, but at the last minute, it paid off.
It's magnificent. It's exceptional what they did. In half-time, they remained calm and added a second goal.
We, the diaspora all over the world, are behind them. We've had an incredible tournament. They gave incredible emotion.
A similarly joyful scene in Marseille, where the final goal set the crowds roaring. Here, the Bastille Day fireworks have just ended, so thousands of fans are trying to reach the closed-off Vieux-Port. The situation deteriorated. Several people were detained after lighting fires and throwing projectiles. Arrests in Paris and Lyon, too, after light clashes with police. But most were there to celebrate. Hopes high for a victory in the upcoming final.
That's it for now. Thanks for watching.
The world is ever changing. The news doesn't wait. That's why at France 24, we'll always be there to help make sense of world events. For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what, France 24 is with you everywhere, all the time.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.